This is the third day of the August 92 7-day retreat at Springwater. I've written down more questions. There were many meetings between yesterday's talk and today's, so often I didn't get to write down the question. So whatever I did record here is not an overview over all of the questions, but those which were closest to the time that I had some time to write them down. I say this because sometimes people say, why don't somebody ask this question, or why do people always ask those questions? Well, there are other questions being asked which I may not have put down. Having been to structured retreats before, I find it interesting that the absence of structure, the absence of being told what to do, has brought me closely in touch with many things. For instance, all my wanting. Does all wanting come out of sense of insufficiency? I'm despairing of all the thoughts that constantly take me away, involve me emotionally, cause pain, and so forth. And seeing them does not stop them either. Will they ever stop? Ever since you asked yesterday in the talk, who is the wanter? I've been flooded with tremendous sadness, tears welling up without really knowing why. Even though at times there is listening to the birds, the I comes in so quickly, wants new insights, doesn't want to be inattentive, endless wanting. I feel real despondent because after all these years, the ego seems to be it seems to be totally inexhaustible. When someone insults me, can I watch what goes on, what it is that gets hurt? When someone flatters me and praises me, appreciates me and so forth, it's even harder to look at the I because it thrives on flattery and doesn't want to look at it. What is it that sustains hurt or attachment to flattery? Can this be watched, whatever sustains it? Can it be watched closely, directly as it happens? The storyline about what happened, the memory of it, repeated over and over in thought and in image, is that what sustains the hurt or the feeling flattery, feeling flattered? I feel that I have something like tendrils emanating from me, reaching throughout the world, tendrils of attachment to things and people, or identification with ideas. And if you touch or attack any one of these tendrils, I will react as though I was personally touched or hurt or attacked. You talked about just seeing people as they are without judgment. But isn't there also a place for speaking out when one sees corruption, wrongdoing, harmful, hurtful actions? Or is all of that being judgmental? Is there something deeper, more meaningful about war than the fact that people like to kill each other? The way you always put it points to all the negative aspects of war. Are there also positive ones? Living more and more alienated in an ever-increasingly organized way. Is there a coming alive in wartime when suddenly one needs to survive? And when one needs to survive, isn't there immediately more attention and aliveness? And also a closeness and intimacy among people, which again fades after the war is over. What is wanting? I find there is wanting all the time, openly or hidden. Today I found some raccoon tracks along the road, and I enjoyed imagining little raccoons having been here. After that, ordinary things were not attended to, were overlooked, because I wanted to see more interesting things. Can one actually see wanting without wanting to see it? I find there's a paradox here. Wanting to inquire into wanting. Two things stand out in reading this that beckon to be discussed more. Obviously, one is this whole question of wanting, the whole phenomenon of wanting in human beings. The other one is it being judgmental to see corruption and wrongdoing, harmful actions, hurting each other, damaging each other? To see that, to speak out, is that being judgmental? Actually, right after the talk on judgment, I made a note of bringing it up myself if nobody else did, to avoid misunderstanding that no judgment means to ignore what is going on, not to see it fully, intelligently, to deny for fear of being judgmental. Of course, this is not meant by non-judgmental perception. Non-judgmental means this whole network of judging, which hooks into our whole past of being judged all the time, judging others, the feeling of superiority that comes from it, or just the sheer habit of it, needing to separate oneself as the judge from the judged. The question is it possible to perceive without that whole network coming into play, without that whole network being energized? The energy just gathering and watching and looking and observing clearly what is going on, not bringing oneself in as the one who knows better or does better or worse, and so forth. In such a clear perception, it becomes obvious what is harmful, deadly. What alienates us or dulls us, divides us, corrupts us. It's so clear. And then is one to speak out against it? Can one? Is one free to do it? Freedom meaning freedom from investment in the speaking out. Not trying to strengthen one's party or one's position, one's group, organization, or oneself, but just a natural pointing to what is going on, coming out of a clear vision, a clear perception. And who are the listeners? Are we also aware of the state of mind of the listener to whom we're pointing something out? Is there contentiousness in us? We love to be contentious. As one person said, it makes us feel more alive to battle. Keeps the juices going inside. Before we felt so bored. Now we can fight with somebody. Point something out that he or they are doing wrong. Is this where we're coming from? Are we aware of the person we're speaking to? Is that person interested in what we're saying? Will it lead to an inquiry together into what has been seen? Open to maybe correct oneself, realize one hasn't seen clearly, not fixed in one's position. Inquiring together, is that possible? In oneself, in the other? Sometimes something may be pointed out to me and I'm not ready to hear it. And yet the fact that somebody has said it, even though at the time there was no readiness to hear it, is helpful. Maybe the mind picks it up and brings it up again at a different time when it becomes meaningful. So one cannot exactly say that pointing something out when the other person is not interested is at all times wrong or missing the mark. Who knows? I think the most important thing is the motive. Is there a motive for wanting to change or correct people, make them better, living up to ideals, or just a simple, heartfelt saying, look, this is what we're doing, and not just that what you're doing, what we're doing. Because if one looks within, the chances are one will find very similar things going on, maybe not in the same magnitude, but at least potentially going on in oneself. One may not do it, but think hostility or adversity. And of course, if one finds oneself part of a system that one cannot continue being part of, because it's clear what it does, that it may intimidate or block out certain looking, forbid certain speaking, it, then not to go on with it, not to go along with it, not to say everyone has to be one with everything. It's not a dictum. The optimum of living is to be one with everything. To leave a place of work or religious worship or whatever when there's realization that one is contributing to division or blindness or whatever. And it doesn't have to happen with animosity or hostility at all. Because one realizes in oneself a tremendous tendency to follow, to belong, to ignore what doesn't look comforting, So to at every opportunity, can we increase our understanding of ourselves and each other? Not judge, but understand, and let action come out of that understanding. Which it does. It does. The right understanding is the first step in right action. They're not two separate things. So how deeply can there be awareness of our motives? Because some of them lie very deep, very hidden. Are we interested in what our motives are? Or afraid of touching that area, which may reveal what we don't want to see about ourselves? And yet the amazing thing is that any kind of insight, any kind of discovery into whatever it is, a self-centered motive or whatever, brings great joy, energy, relief to see the truth of something. Let us go on now to the question which has occupied a lot of minds. About wanting. What is wanting? And that question is alive and interesting to one. It is a passionate question, as somebody put it. Then there will be observation of the fact that there is wanting almost at every moment of our lives. Wanting or fearing, which go hand in hand. We want because we fear, and we fear that we won't get what we want or lose what we have. So they're complementary, fearing and wanting. So that's the first discovery, that there's wanting almost all the time. I remember driving out west. We used to do it a lot to visit relatives in the west. As a passenger, usually passenger, my husband loves to drive, and I like to be a passenger. It's not sexism. And it became so clear how the mind constantly projected things it was looking forward to, it wanted, or it didn't want. Wanting, wanting, wanting. And out of that, a real strong curiosity. Why this wanting? What is its essence? Maybe if it wasn't so easily possible to use thought and imagination to bring good feelings to the body, arouse good feelings, good energies, then there wouldn't be all this wanting. But it's possible to imagine anything to bring pleasure. And the imagination can almost function like the pleasure one had or never had. Function in stimulating the senses, the organs, the muscles, the whole body. But that possibility keeps going. There's an addiction going on. to thinking about pleasurable things, to make this body feel alive, maybe not war, but pleasurable thoughts. Children start doing it when things become unbearable or too boring or whatever all is the cause of it, to imagine themselves. According to the fairy tales they hear, make themselves into princesses with imaginary companions who are nice, not judgmental, protective, little guardian angels. We just recently saw a movie. It's based on a short story by Thurber. It's called The Secret Life of Walter Mitty. Walter Mitty, a sort of milquetoasty, man-dominated, henpecked by mother or wife. It's different in the story in a movie. Without courage, always afraid, not assertive, always doing things wrong, and then drifting into these imaginations of being at the steering wheel of a sinking ship, 4 days without food, or in the cockpit of a fighter plane and downing one German plane after another, and then celebrated as he appears in his beautiful uniform, always women around there wanting him. Or the gambler who out-gambles the shrewdest gambler of the West. Surgeon. He rescues both the anesthetist and the patient. And then suddenly somebody saying, Mitty or Walter, you're not paying attention or something. And there he is in his measly position. So we can do that. And now researchers tell us that there is a pleasure center in the brain not far, very close to the pain center. There have been experiments implanting some electrodes into some unfortunate rats. And the rat can either be stimulated at that pleasure center or tap a lever for food, and the pleasure center far wins over the food. Getting that pleasure center excited to the point of getting enraged. An interesting finding that too much pleasure leads to rage and violence. And our videos reflect that. The transition or intermingling of sex and violence, and pleasure and sadism and so forth. And also, both centers so close. When the pleasure center's exhausted and nerve centers do get exhausted firing, then the other takes over. It feels painful. Or pain begins to feel pleasurable. All this is possible without any particular outward circumstances. For the rat, of course, it was electrical stimulation, but we can do it by just imagining. Keeping us in a pleasurable mode for a while until it tips over into depression or rage or violence. And wanting that, this is the addictive part of it. Wanting more of that because it feels good. Feeling good wants more feeling good. Feeling bad wants to be rid of feeling bad. Same wanting. So that's one aspect of wanting to continue feeling good, pleasurable, energized. The other aspect is trying to get away from something that doesn't feel exciting at all. This moment, at least so we think. Trying to get away from that. Actually, I think coming to a retreat, as we do, from a very stimulating world, most of us, very few people come here from a hermitage. They wouldn't come here if they had a hermitage. Come from a lot of stimulation, family, job, entertainment, movies, music, and just the sheer side effects of our civilization, the noise of cars, the traffic, the smells, and sounds, and long hours, and commuting. Children with their demands. Husband and wives with their demands. Newspapers, magazines. Participating in all that goes on. At home, over TV, in the office, and so stimulated totally all day long. Body gets used to that. Just like to caffeine and cigarettes, or whatever we call addictive substances, the body gets used to the constant stimulation. And no wonder arriving here, even though the first evening one revels in the quietness and beauty of the place, the next day it feels different. There's a state of withdrawal, no stimulation. Maybe not even, some people even stop drinking coffee or tea. Some people stop smoking. I'm not saying you should. It's all possible here. But it is really like going, what people tell me, those who have gone through drying up, or whatever one calls these processes of getting rid of an addiction. So, as the body feels, one can't explain or describe how. Boredom is only a sort of a cover word for something that is indescribable, the absence of stimulation. Can one take note of that and be with this body and mind that feels like that? Or at least begin to understand why the constant indulging in stimulating fantasies. Occupation of the mind, at least that's possible. That seems to be more thriving in a place like this than elsewhere. Because it's the only distraction there is. The only entertainment. Although I doubt whether it is, I'm not sure it is more here, it's more, but there's more awareness of it, that it's taking place. One person was saying this, I seem to jump, literally jump, from one thing to another. This to this, and she listed it all. And I don't think I do that in my daily life. I'm not so sure. We're not aware of it in our daily life. There's so much distraction, so much going on. Almost no quietness for listening inwardly. So not to assume that thoughts and imagery and jumping around increases here, but it comes more to the fore and can be perceived as how this mind operates and this body in full conjunction. Body and mind are totally orchestrated to each other. There's no division there. So out of this sort of blah state of nothing happening, a discomfort of maybe craving something, some stimulation, the discomfort of it, is that also the soil for wanting? Wanting away from this, away from what has never been looked at, listened to, felt, entered into, for its own sake, because it's there. I found this to be very clear, that wanting is moving away from what is. You could say, well, wanting is too, of course it is. But it is trying to separate and move away from looking, being, listening, feeling, to directly unadorned what is. Do you see it that way too? Can one observe it for oneself? Because it's no good, not enough to just hear it and digest it intellectually, although that is part of it. Understanding it intellectually is a part of understanding, but it also has to be directly experienced as it happens. That unpleasant or uncomfortable state and the moving away into wanting something. And then, as this is discovered, caught, there it is, immediately wondering, why not stay with what is? I'm putting it, stretching it out verbally, but it can be instant. And one may find a real resistance to being with what is, because it's discomforting, painful, boring, unexciting, maybe fearful, anxious. And all our teaching and all our preceding experience has been, don't touch it, resist it, don't touch pain, don't be with fear or anxiety, move away. Maybe it's already programmed instinctually into the body. Move away from pain. Body, mind. I don't know. But I realize that there is a strong or subtle resistance to touching, as though it was a hot wire, touching fear, pain, boredom, just touching it, meaning not moving away. Being with what cannot be put into words or known, for that matter, because it's happening now, before it's known. And words will be put aside in this being with, because they don't help. Words prejudice us for or against something. Person who was reporting, walking and seeing these footprints in the mud of raccoons, and the joy and the imagination supplied some more joy, imagining these little raccoons there, and then out to see more of it. And at such a moment, if it comes into awareness right then and there, can one wonder, what's here now? Beside the imagination running like a video, like a titillating video, what is here? What's going on right now? And listening inwardly, outwardly, without expecting anything, without expecting the spectacular. No expectation. Is that possible? It is possible. If expectation, which can be very subtle, is detected, and in the detecting need not continue. Because what I'm interested in is what is actually now. Not next moment, not the last moment, or tomorrow or yesterday, but now. Sometimes when I talk like this with people, they say, well, I can't get at the now. It's impossible. I don't see it. Well, what do you see? What do you see right now? What is there? Numbness, dullness, no feeling, whatever. What is it? Not expect something to be worthy of seeing. We have ideas already of what there should be. Nothing? Is nothing there? Then what is this nothing? Let it be touched, felt, heard. And not exclude the plane or the birds, because they're also here. There's breathing going on. It's not spectacular, but it's going on all the time. And maybe for the first time it can be experienced as something unfathomable, something unknowable and yet taking place, this moment. Not as I think it takes place, because I'm listening freshly. Maybe beginning to sense that it involves the whole body, not just what I thought from the nose to the abdomen and back out. I put aside what I know about everything in this open listening, in this curiosity of finding out what is now, starting with nothing, no expectation. Is that possible? And for a moment, maybe, and then I find I'm wanting again, wanting something. And that's also what is taking place now. The movement of wanting. Can I listen to that hum? In other words, whatever takes place, suddenly finding that I've been thinking for 5 minutes, no attention at all. Why be despondent over? It's what happened. And right now there's attention that reveals what happened. If a reaction comes in, I should, after all of these years of meditation, not be lost in thought after a moment of attention, then can that also be heard as something that's happening now? Not be caught up in the reaction and judgment of oneself. Is that possible? So whatever happens, the wind in the trees and people moving and thoughts capturing the mind and emotions and fantasies and a moment of nowness, feeling nothing, the breathing. It's all happening in one stream of happenings or consciousness, and nothing to be judged right or wrong, good or bad. There's nothing I should have achieved by now or should achieve later or have already achieved. There's all thought. It's also happening in this stream of consciousness. No energy wasted on for or against anything. And if it happens because it's so habitual, then to see it as one more happening that just happened at this moment of attention. And what else is there beside the reaction that I just became aware of, that I should be or shouldn't have? There are thoughts in the mind almost all of the time. But at a moment of listening, there may be no thought. But then to say, I should keep this moment of no thought, is more thought. And it smothers this moment of attention, wanting more of it. Can that be seen? Seen wisely, intelligently, learning about oneself as one goes, as the wind blows. I notice I feel despondent. I must have had an expectation which didn't come true. Can I see that? Look at the expectation. What did I expect? To be without thoughts. And see that it is an expectation. It is a thought, an ideal. has nothing to do with the reality of this moment, of wind and airplanes. Can we become intimate with the tremendous impact of our ideals on our perception and question them thoroughly, why we have them? To think that I may be able to have a mind without thought may release comforting chemicals in the body. But then when I find the mind is full of thought, then come the desponding chemicals causing despondence. Can we be wise about all of that? Watching it in ourselves and therefore watching the human mind. And what about the question, is this a paradox? Because there's still wanting going on in wanting to observe wanting. I think this paradox takes place in the intellect. Experiment with it yourself. In listening quietly to the hum of wanting that was, or that may be going on right now. There is no wanting, there's only listening. I may think I want to find out more about this. But to listen, wanting itself has to come into view. It does come into view. It's being observed, felt, listened to, touched. And in that observation, it slows down or disappears, at least for a moment. So can we always start precisely where we are, full of wants, full of fears? One person in a meeting said, I want depth, I don't want to live superficially, but superficially we live most of the time. Can we start there, which is here, and listen to what we feel and call is superficiality? Let it reveal itself and listen to the resistances, the deeper motives, which reveal themselves in such quiet, unpremeditated listening. And one may find to one's surprise that what is going on, the rustling of leaves, moving of people and sounds of airplanes and birds, is just there, undivided from an observer. It's just there. Is it? The moment I want something of it, then the observer or the wanter comes into being again. But is it possible to listen to the wind and the trees without wanting anything of it, just listening? And the breathing is there too. The sound of a motor. What is there to want? It's all there. Everything is here. We will end here for today.